The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Bob Enders. I'm a Senior Director for GRC Solutions with SafePaaS. To begin with, I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time to attend our session today, where we will be discussing ways to manage privileged user access, a key area of access risk. With me today, I've got Adil Khan, who's going to follow our presentation and add some aspects from his experiences. So Adil, you wanted to say a few words?
Yeah, I just want to welcome everyone to this important topic. We're hearing from many of our customers that we've helped in the past with access controls and risk management in general, that one of the areas remaining as a challenge for many organizations is, how do you manage those super users in your ERP applications? So my experience is mostly with Oracle E-Business Suite, PeopleSoft, JD Edwards, and then most recently with the Oracle ERP Cloud. So, I think of super users as people that have access to setups, master data, and so forth. And so you cannot eliminate that. You cannot stop people from creating suppliers and paying suppliers. So how do you manage that? And so we thought it'd be a good educational session from the lessons we have learned in the market to share with you today. And this broadcast, of course, will be recorded as well. So if you want to share that with others in your team, after that, please feel free to send them the link. We'll be sending you the link to the broadcast. So that's just kind of a welcome to everybody. Bob, thanks for organizing this area. Thank you.
Sure, Del. Just so you're aware, our session has been set up where you can submit questions via chat, which we'll cover at the end of the presentation. So as we proceed, feel free to submit any questions that that come to mind. This is the agenda that we've got scheduled for today's presentation. Obviously, once again, I'm Bob Enders, Senior GRC Director with SafePaaS, been in the software industry pretty much my entire career, spanning over 35 years. Been a software developer, consultant, risk advisor. But primarily this topic, I've been doing risk advisory work for the past 9 years with Oracle and SafePaaS. You want to say anything about your background, Adil, before we continue? You must be busy. So also, we'll introduce a little bit about SafePaaS, who we are, and what our business focus is.
Yeah, please continue. Yeah.
Great. SafePaaS is a risk management software firm with significant experience establishing application security controls to help organizations minimize and mitigate risk. Risk management solutions are our sole focus, where we have extended our expertise. We do not do Oracle ERP or any ERP implementation consulting. We've been recognized by several organizations as to our capabilities with a very active leadership presence in the Oracle community. We attend and participate in the many conferences such as Oracle Application Users Group, Open World, regional and international events as identified on this slide. Adil Khan is our CEO and co-authored the book on GRC for Oracle Application, extending our leadership and knowledge in this area. He also heads the Oracle GRC SIG. We also participate in ISACA, SAP, and other conferences focusing on risk management, application security, and controls. Most recently, we have been recognized by Gartner as having the most comprehensive GRC solution in the market. We support multiple ERPs and can do cross-validation as needed. SafePaaS has over 250 clients. We have helped organizations establish a controls framework for their ERP applications and managing overall risk. As you can see, many of our clients across different industries where we have helped them address their risk challenges, leveraging technology to automate many of their manual processes. This slide represents SafePaaS product offerings. While SafePaaS is our company name, it's also an umbrella term that covers the 5 major groups of capabilities within our product offering. At the bottom of this slide, you just notice ArcPaaS. This covers risk and compliance management for SOX, GDPR, and other compliance requirements, helping organizations manage their organizational and operational risks. As we move up the slide, AccessPaaS on the left addresses access management for ERP applications, which include segregation of duties, user certification, also iAccess and FireFighter ID, which we'll be discussing today as part of our solution for managing privileged users. MonitorPaaS controls monitoring of configurations, master data, and transactions, looking for policy violations and questionable transactions. This too is also a component of the Fire ID capabilities. And ProcessPaaS is used for process management in order to eliminate errors out of sequence processing of key tasks such as a period end close. As we know, a material misstatement may occur if tasks are not followed in the proper order. ProcessPaaS provides this level of control. And SafeSite for dashboards and analytics and custom reporting, allowing you to build specific business intelligence around your risks within your organization specific to your needs. A key capability of SafePaaS is our complete solution built on a common database that benefits our clients' control framework management through this level of integration. For example, our audit manager capabilities in ArcPaaS can reference controls and results from AccessPaaS or MonitorPaaS, providing the audit details for the testing of these controls. That's it about SafePaaS and our capabilities. Next thing I want to do is discuss privileged access risks. It is important to understand these risks and why improved management and monitoring is needed. As we all know, privileged user access is a necessity for managing most any IT application. Someone or a group of individuals must have the ability to maintain the application as needed to support organizational business processes when issues arise. Numerous situations occur when an organization needs to grant what we'll term super user access to employees under unusual circumstances. These are instances of exceptional access that fall outside the user's typical job role or responsibility and will typically create access policy violations that need to be highly supervised. Despite the need, access privileges that create risks such as segregation of duty conflicts need to be mitigated and requires the maintenance of an audit log of all super user access activities in order to satisfy regulatory compliance requirements. But this level of privileged access comes with risks. These are several examples of risks where actual malfeasance has been identified. According to the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, it's estimated $348 billion a year in corporate losses can be tied directly to privileged user fraud. In a recent IT Ponemons Institute survey of IT practitioners showed 45% of the respondents believe that the threat will continue to grow, and another 43% believe it will remain the same over the next 1 to 2 years. This is almost 90% of the IT practitioners believe that privileged access risk is very critical. And an example of actual violation is that a US-based global energy company was enticed by a foreign organization to steal source code and intellectual property from his employer. As a result of this theft, the energy company lost 3/4 of its revenue, half its workforce, and more than $1 billion in market valuation. The challenge is while privileged access is necessary, it needs to be determined to what degree and how do organizations manage this need and minimize the risk. Too much access has been the typical response, which obviously increases privileged access risk. As part of the presentation, we will introduce an option to consider to manage this risk more effectively. As an organization, SafePaaS has developed controls monitoring user access, which can be extended to privileged users. But with the SafePaaS FireFighter ID capabilities, we are able to prevent and monitor this level of access in a much more effective manner. In this slide, we kind of identify who are the privileged users. These are the typical users with privileged access: database administrators, system administrators, IT audit practitioners, applications developers, and so forth. These percentages are based on the Ponemons Institute survey identifying what percentage of that particular business function has privileged user access. So just using one as an example here for data center operations, which is the largest, 23% of those individuals have privileged user access. Privileged user access is difficult to manage, and it's because it's most extensive, hard to mitigate, and hard to detect, as it is done by authorized users doing things that they are authorized to perform. So given that level of access, they could provide process transactions specific to whatever their intent might be. In most cases, they are often very technically savvy and have an elevated understanding of the systems and processes and procedures, making it easy to cover their tracks. One instance that I'm aware of is a client up in Canada, or I should say an organization up in Canada, the Department of Defense, where they had a consultant who became a trusted advisor as he had worked there over 10 years. And over that 10-year period, he was able to embezzle over $10 million because he knew the business processes and how to circumvent those processes because he had the technical knowledge. The challenge is how to provide the level of access needed for these users to effectively manage the applications to address issues as they arise, while not impacting organizational operations, but also minimize the risks with the privileged access users. For those in Oracle ERP, Oracle provides, as you know, seated roles and responsibilities, GL super users, payables managers, system administrators, and so forth. A lot of times these are typically used by e-business suite clients. In some cases that we've seen that they'll take a certain responsibility and just rename it and not necessarily change the functionality and level of access within those responsibilities. So it does become quite a bit of a challenge to identify what the risks are associated with each one of these users. In the majority of the clients and projects that I've worked on, the very first time we run an SOD analysis, a lot of the violations are attributed to the IT department, where they have super user access allocated to multiple individuals. And that becomes an area of risk, and that's identified by these clients, and they're looking for ways to address that risk. Next thing I want to do is cover setting up a standard ERP privileged access user. For this, we're going to use the Oracle ABS as an example of how this is currently established and managed. But this is still applicable to other ERPs. Those that are EBS users are probably familiar with this screen, and those that are in the provisioning side of the business probably recognize this form for giving users access into the ERP. So the typical process is obviously you want to identify a super user name. In this case, it's Paula, and it's assigned to an employee record, so it's a valid user in the system that's tied to an actual individual in the organization. So that's a pretty straightforward process. The next thing we want to do is look at the password policies. And here we have days, accesses, and none. And this is always a high area of risk because with none, that password will never change. And the challenge becomes, or the risk is also a bit apparent when this user password could become exposed to somebody else and they would have access to the same information. So it's very important to not establish a none password expiration date. It's always ideal to have days or accesses as a minimum. And also indefinite access. And this is where we see typically with a lot of our clients. They set up a super user, give them the level of access that they need in order to support the application, and never make it a termination date. So they make it out there, put it out there indefinite. And for the reason I mentioned on the password issue, if this information was somehow got in the hands of somebody else in the organization, they would have carte blanche access into the ERP. If we look at the super user assignments, this is where we assign responsibilities to that particular user, giving them the level of access they need in order to perform the tasks associated with privileged access. And then also, if we look at the menu hierarchy, each one of these items are associated with a responsibility, and each one of those has menus, forms, and functions under that gives access into the application. So as you can tell, it's very straightforward process, but it does have a lot of risk if things aren't managed correctly in order to reduce that risk. As I mentioned, password expiration, put a limit on the amount of time they have access, but also the responsibilities are defined properly in order to limit what they can actually provide. Most organizations set up these users without any restrictions or monitoring. This is a privileged access risk. Organizations are looking to do a better job in controlling and limiting this level of access as this becomes a security and audit issue. Privileged access cannot be managed effectively through the standard provisioning process. Typically, once a privileged access is given to a user, it is not revoked, creating a high level of risk. Deprovisioning occurs either manually or automatically when someone leaves the organization, privileged access users aren't affected by that process. So it has to be a deliberate effort to deprovision a privileged user in order to take away that level of access. Typically, IT operations is responsible for assigning, managing, and controlling privileged user access rights. However, the business and IT security are the functions most responsible for conducting the user role certification. And typically, the IT organization, IT security organization, doesn't have access to the deprovisioning capabilities. So in a lot of cases, IT monitors themselves. Privileged access goes beyond the assigned individuals needed access to address the issue. It is difficult to determine what level of access a privileged access user needs to address a pressing issue. In most cases, privileged access users are given more access than they actually need. Every organization is different, making it difficult to create a single unified view of privileged user access and how to manage this level of access. Organizations typically have many business processes, with each process having unique functionality requiring a detailed understanding of each application. Because of the complexity of the application, privileged access is typically assigned to more than one person, so establishing a single privileged access model is unattainable. Now I want to introduce SafePaaS solution for FireFighter ID privileged access management. This capability allows you to control privileged user access into your ERP and monitor the user activities to ensure nothing questionable has been processed or executed. There's a clear business case for improving privileged user access controls. Changing technology where identity management is becoming more of a risk concern. Many organizations are deploying multiple applications such as cloud, on-premise, custom applications, and so forth. Privileged access needs are managed for each mission-critical application where fraud may have a significant impact on the organization. So each application has to provide a certain level of privileged access. As mentioned in an earlier slide, almost 90% of the IT practitioners believe that privileged access fraud will increase or remain the same for the next 1 to 2 years. Improvements are a must, as the privileged access is creating more risk, which I have previously mentioned can have a negative impact on the organization. Most organizations' provisioning processes are very unstructured with emails, phone calls, ticketing systems that don't provide an auditable, consistent process. This is compounded with privileged users due to the level of access and related risks. There's a need to enforce policy management within the provisioning process. The more you can automate, the more predictable and effective it will be to manage. So help defining a established process that everyone follows, that everyone's aware of, would help address some of the weaknesses in a manual, more intense effort. With automation and focus on access management, you can improve the provisioning process with policy evaluation, and workflow approvals to prevent introducing risk to the organization. The SafePaaS FireFighter ID capabilities help improve management and monitoring of this level of access.
So those are good points, Bob. I think I just want to add a couple of things just from my experience in the field when I've helped customers with a business case here, if that's okay with you.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think just if you go back to the previous slide, there are a couple of things in there that we are all focused on this call, which is security and compliance, and that's where we live and breathe. But one of the things that's a business case, which may not be as obvious, but it's very useful, is that operational efficiency and user experience. When you automate the user provisioning process in general and privileged user in particular, what you'll find is that the amount of time your help desk spends on just answering emails to people that are either switching roles or new to the team or have left the company, all that activity really occupies quite a bit of help desk's time. In many cases, 50% plus of their productivity is lost due to just dealing with that communication component of user provisioning The other challenge that I think highlighted on that security form earlier is that security form is very difficult to eyeball 500 plus privileges around a role or responsibility within any ERP system. And so when the help desk is out there making judgment calls about who should have what access, it's very difficult to do that without looking at the data. So there is definitely a operational efficiency part of the business case. And when I've helped our clients put together a business case for streamlining the process, that's one of the things I always encourage them to include. So as you learn from this webinar and go back and talk about security and compliance, and put together a business case, please consider the operational efficiency. The other piece is the user experience themselves. It's sort of obvious, but I'll state that again, that because this system allows the user a more self-service capability, and so they can track their progress, and Bob will demonstrate some of that capability in a minute. So now the users are more in control of, what's the status of our request, and users are looking and demanding that IT provide a better user experience of what they're noticing, from the popular websites that they do, for example, shopping on Amazon or whatever. So I think having that level of self-service capability improves the user satisfaction, reduces your cost of ownership for maintaining a complex ERP system, and obviously the primary scope here is to provide security and compliance. So I encourage you to talk to us, reach out to us, talk to us about business case and what are the specific pain points. Chances are there's a case study that or a customer reference that we can share with you where we have run into a similar situation in the past 10 or 15 years, having done this for many other clients around the world. So Bob, I just wanted to kind of talk more about the business case in addition to the excellent points you've made around the key areas of why customers are moving forward to this process. So if you can maybe take up the next slide and talk through the process on how we handle that in SafePaaS, that'd be great. Thank you.
No, thanks, Dil. That was great insight into some of the actual experiences that we're working with various clients that are guiding some of our efforts. This slide represents the provisioning process using iAccess, which is slightly different for privileged users. So when we look at the slide by swim lane, if you look at the very first swim lane, this is where you establish your application access rules, such as segregation of duties, and also which employees are going to be made available to provision access into the ERP. That can come from your existing ERP users. So if you're looking to add capabilities to their responsibilities, or you can have a onboarding process, whether it's coming from Active Directory, identity management, or your HR onboarding process. You can bring those into iAccess for provisioning within the ERP. But look at the second swim lane. We have to register, each user that's going to be given access into the ERP. So that's a required step in the process. So you just don't want to give anybody access. So we look at the registration, the next step in the process. This is where the request actually occurs. And to Adil's point, we provide a self-service approach. So the user experience would be better, so they can request the access that they looking to have provided to them, or you can have that done by the manager. So their managers can request which roles should be assigned to that individual. So once those roles are assigned, it starts off a process to test the policies against that level of access. And then once that policy is completed, policy analysis is completed, it goes through the approval process. So we workflow approvals to up to 5 levels of approval, review and approval, for the individual manager, business process owner, IT auditor, maybe someone in IT can review and make sure that the level of access given to that specific user isn't causing a significant violation. Once that's been approved, upon final approval, iAccess will automatically go out and update the ERP for that particular user and send an email notification to them that they now have access to the application if it's a new employee, with a user ID and a temporary password. And then from there, they can start using the application for their daily activities. And then from the last slide is that I as security, can monitor the applications through the different components of SafePaaS, whether it's Policy Manager for SOD, Monitor Pass for monitoring certain transactions, and so forth. As I mentioned, the Firefighter ID is slightly different, but follows the same methodology and processes. The user requests the access to the privilege role. Once that privilege role is requested, initiates the review, the policy review. And once it's approved, it enables the monitors to be instituted. So what those monitors do is track that individual's activities and areas that they've accessed within the ERP, and captures that information for reporting back to IT security or IS security through standard reports within Monitor Pass. So we're basically logging all their activities and provide a report that the appropriate individuals can review and validate that this person did not do anything out of unexpected. So the next thing I want to do is just kind of introduce a case study of one of our prospects where we've had a chance to work with them, looking at better ways to improve their access management capabilities. They're a supplier of marketing and sales solutions for the automotive industry. They're the country's leading communication, media and automotive services company with more than 50,000 employees. They're over 100 years old, and they're providing products and solutions to customers around the world. Their focus was to improve their segregation of duties controls within their mission-critical applications, but they're very focused on improving super user access within the ERP to reduce that risk. And this actually came from one of the C-level individuals who had mandated a solution that will provide that level of capabilities, because I believe he came from a previous employer where fraud was perpetrated against the company because of a super user who was given too much access into the application. And also they wanted to increase the external auditor's reliance on ERP access. So the solution that we've recommended for them is SafePaaS for access management, but also iAccess and FireFighter ID in order to address and manage the privileged user access. The justification, we estimated $150,000 in annual cost savings. They can create policies to ensure compliance during the provisioning process, lower total cost of ownership, improve their SOD and access controls testing time, providing auditors with log reports showing all updates, reviews, and approval design changes, and accelerate the ERP approval process time, identifying valid SOD conflicts. So this is just one example of where we have a prospecting client that is using Firefighter Access, using iAccess. This slide is the iAccess provisioning slide for an EBS client. So here in this example, as you can tell, we have obviously a username, their manager names associated, and also a list of responsibilities in the left box that can be assigned to this particular user. We can also end date this user from this form also. So if you're looking for a solution to manage the entire provisioning and deprovisioning process, iAccess can facilitate that requirement. Also, I want to point up in the upper right-hand corner, we have a checkbox for Enable Firefighter. Not all users will have access to this particular checkbox. If you're not allocated the ability to enable Firefighter, they won't even see this checkbox. So if I were to assign a certain responsibility and click on Next, well, in this particular case, I clicked on the Enable Firefighter checkbox, and it reduces those responsibilities that are available to this user that has Firefighter ID or super user access that can be monitored by our solution. So essentially what you can do is you just pick the responsibility or role that you want to assign to this user, and click on Next. And what this also provides is you can inadvertently assign something to somebody that shouldn't have access to this capabilities. So if I click on Next, the system automatically assigns an end date to the user's access using this responsibility. So that way, this level of access is only being allowed for a single day. Now you have the ability to change it, but by default, it's broken down to, or it's limited to 1 day's level of access. So once again, you're putting a little bit more controls around the privileged user access by limiting the amount of time that they're going to have access into the application using those level of capabilities. So if I click on submit, the system will start going through the workflow process. iAccess workflow communicates with the designated users for approval via email, but they do have the ability to log into the application themselves. Also, not only is it sending email to the approvers, it's also sending emails to the requester that this particular request is in the approval queue assigned to a specific user. So if I click on the hyperlink, it'll take me directly into the application for review and approval of this request. So I don't necessarily have to log into an application. This and the next slide show the approval request form. Here the approver can review the request, also any violations that may occur with this access. Then they can decide whether to approve or reject the request. And if they reject the request, they would obviously be required to enter a comment as to why this request was rejected. In the continuation of the same form, this provides the details associated with this requested request. The user that's associated with the request, the responsibility that's being requested for the user, but also it gives you all the rule violations that this request will generate, so you know in advance that the SOD violations that may be generated by letting this person have access, so you can monitor those violations. This also works for just standard iAccess users that aren't necessarily privileged users. It goes through the same process, but also does the SOD validation, so you're aware of the violations before they're entered into the application. And upon final approval, the user will get a notification that the request has been approved, and it'll provide any comments that are included. Also to give the user, if these, once again, as I mentioned previously, if it's a new user, get a temporary password, and they can actually log into the application. And the last step in the firefighter access request is the tracking and certification of the activities of the privileged access user. Since this is a privileged user access firefighter ID request, Monitor Pass control is initiated to automatically track the user's activities in the ERP using the designated responsibility. This control is used to certify that the user's activities have not processed transactions that would be considered fraud or risk to the organization. So here we're given a report that can, once again, validate the person's activities in the application, and that way you've got that, once again, that certification as to what that person actually performed. And also, within iAccess, we provide a complete audit trail of who reviewed and approved the level of a user's access. And one of the things that we're seeing with our clients is there's more audit focus on the provisioning process, because they want to know when a user is provided in the application, who would authorize that person's level of access. And through the iAccess, we provide that level of structure and control around the process in order to make sure that nobody's given access that hasn't had the proper authorizations. And that's it for our presentation. I'd like to field any questions that the group has submitted.
Yeah, Bob, so there's a couple of areas that I've seen questions come up, and guys, please feel free to add your comments to this as well. So one of the questions is around just the reporting capability of the product that enables companies to really rely on this as a control and overall control for their privileged users as well as other users. So can you talk through like what type of reporting users can expect from the system?
Yeah, what I had showed you were some of the reports that are specific to the firefighter ID process. But SafePaaS, through all the different components of SafePaaS, ArcPaaS, AccessPaaS, ProcessPaaS, and so forth, have a complete set of reports. I would say well over 50 different reports that can be customized for each specific user of the application. So if I'm an individual that responsible for remediating GL SOD violations, I can create a report, customize a standard report that will only focus on those specific violations. So that way it makes it easier for your business process owners to monitor their area of interest when it comes to SOD violations. Once again, we provide quite a few different reports of information that's very difficult to extract out of the ERP, because we pull that data into SafePaaS and provide the reporting framework in order to obviously provide the standard reports, but also the ability to create custom reports. And those custom reports can be, charts, graphs. You can control the content of those reports. You can put filters. You can download it to a spreadsheet. Once again, we provide a level of reporting that's pretty significant to help help individuals remediate the violations that might be generated.
Okay, good point. So yeah, basically to summarize what Bob said, you will have a central portal for all your access controls in one place, where you can see provisioning requests, violations, treatment of those risks that have escalated, as well as an audit trail on privileged user access, specifically, what type of access was granted, what activity was performed, and if there was any activity that was outside the requested area. For example, if somebody went in and, change a procure to pay setup, for example, three-way control, or change up supplier bank account because they have elevated access, which is a privilege that they were granted for a certain thing, you'll be able to catch that, and then not only have that, but also an audit trail, so the control is fully effective. And that's one of the things that that Bob, I think you and I have run into with a number of our clients, where they do have the best of intentions and they have all the capabilities that the base ERP provides, but when it comes to controls, they're not always complete. There's a control is not a fully implemented control or effective control unless it's complete and it's covering 100% of your risk, or 99.9% of your risk, of course. So that's what we look for, and this approach that not only provides you the detective report, but also preventive approach, where now you have been able to prevent privileged users from having access that they don't need to perform a task, and when they do get that ask, you detect exactly what's changed. So all of that is available in reporting, as Bob said, and you can slice and dice those reports yourself without requiring any IT support using the ad hoc reporting capability. The other area that the questions are coming from is around IDM. So most of our customers are either looking at IDM or have implemented some sort of an IDM. And if you can talk a little bit about how our customers can leverage IDM. Do we work with IDM? Do we compete with it? How does that fit into the picture that you have here?
Well, the level of integration that we provide with identity management, whether it's Oracle Identity Management, Okta, SailPoint, is we provide a couple of different options. One of the things that identity management does really well is managing the provisioning process, but what they don't do as well is the evaluation of access at a fine-grained level, such as down to the function level. So we're able to integrate with them through their different integration capabilities to include SOD analysis as part of the provisioning process at the detailed level in order to identify violations before they actually are introduced into the application. So once again, we can, or we can just be part of this workflow approval process. It's up to the individual and to what extent they're using the identity management solution where they want to have integration with SafePaaS.
Okay, thank you. And just to add to that, Bob, I recently worked, and you and I both worked with a client on the West Coast. That's a government agency, and they require all their employees to have certain level of security clearance to get access to their assets, information assets, which are obviously in their Oracle systems, ERP systems. So basically, they have an IDM solution but the challenge they had was it was unable to get down to the privileges that are down at the function level or at the data level, right? Mm-hmm. And so while IDMs are very helpful in starting the provisioning cycle and even granting roles access and providing you that single sign-on capability, as opposed to the old, the network directory structure that's been around for a very long time. So there's definitely an improvement, but the challenge from a controls perspective is that it does not provide you that full coverage down to the privilege level. Our customers, for example, in Europe that are facing regulations around GDPR, data protection, and so forth, are also looking for some way to get them to that granular level of who's actually accessed or updated an employee file or a record, and that is not the purpose of an IDM solution. So we iAccess with our IDM partners that offer that solution, and they sort of rely on us to provide that additional coverage. Now, it can be done at different levels. You can, as Bob said, you could have it where we initiate the request in iAccess, and it goes into an IDM to actually provision that request, or it can go, if you don't have an IDM solution, it can go straight into the ERP. Like for our EBS customers, most of them would just have iAccess provision the user directly into the e-business suite. Same thing with other ERP systems. In other cases, the customers will ask us to basically have the IDM, or even in some cases the ticketing system. Like one client I was recently talking to Bob was using certain. They weren't quite ready to move off ServiceNow because they paid good money for GRC module in ServiceNow, which is a good ticketing system, but obviously it doesn't do any kind of SOD testing or privileged user testing. However, it provides an excellent place to start off that process. So we have web services that can leverage your existing ticketing solution or just existing ITM solutions. So we can be in the background or in the foreground, just depending on the opportunity. But what we're going after is that full coverage that you as a customer or our partners require to ensure that you have that coverage. I mean, the fact is we don't live behind that single firewall and single monolithic ERP system with a single device anymore, which was at our desktop. We have mobile devices. We are mobile. We're dealing with cloud applications, one form or the other, and we don't know what's next. The last 10 years, if there are any indication, we're going to have more and more new ways of accessing information in the next 10 years. So to protect that, you need a scalable solution, and that's what the purpose of building SafePaaS was, to provide you that capability. So if you want to try it out, I think, Bob, I'm going to turn it back over to you to close the meeting. But the best thing is to reach out to Bob and others in our organization and try it out and see how that fits your company, because obviously every pain point we see from our customers is unique, and it's not one solution for all. So Bob, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you for a great presentation.
Great, thanks, Adil. I just want to mention one thing that on this integration question is one of the things that we provide is cross-application validation. And as we just see in the marketplace, organizations are picking up on-premise or cloud applications, and the users have access to both. One of the things that we provide is the ability to do SOD across multiple applications. So I think that's a very important capability as the industry moves towards a little bit more, I guess, lack of a better term, fragmented environments. But once again, I'd like to thank everybody for attending our session today. And as Adil mentioned, if you're interested in a trial, go to our website, www.safepaas.com, and you can sign up for a free evaluation. And we'd love to have the opportunity to prove our capabilities to your organization. Once again, thanks for your time, and have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.